Hello, welcome to Poetry Changes Lives, Poetry and History, a thought for the day, all in one book. You know, poetry and history combine very nicely sometimes, very neatly. And of course, poetry in prehistoric times was used to record history, because when people hadn't learned to write, the best way of remembering history was to put it to rhyme or rhythm. It's much easier to remember poetry than just the simple spoken word. Poetry ever since has been used to adorn history, historic events. And you can read all about it on my website, poetrychangeslives.com, of course. Let me demonstrate, because today is a very significant day. In history, it is the day that Yuri Gagarin, the Russian cosmonaut, became the first man in space in 1961 when he orbited the Earth. What a day that was. And significantly, almost exactly the same time, all these years later, 65 years later, on this day, a much newer set of astronauts have just splashed down in the ocean, having returned from a journey from Florida round the moon and back to Earth again. It's almost become, to many people, a routine that's been going on over the past 60 to 65 odd years. And but just imagine that day in 1961 when Gagarin did it for the first time. Wow, I remember the shock that went round the world. Nobody quite expected it to happen that soon. The Americans were gobsmacked. They thought they were going to be the first to put a man in space, but the Russians beat them to it. And of course, in the Cold War, that was a huge achievement. They were very proud of that. And imagine the bravery of a man like Gagarin going where no one had ever been before, in a tiny, tiny space capsule stuck on top of a rocket, a massive, great rocket, and having the faith that you were going to be shot up into space and that your controllers would be able to bring you back down to Earth again. I mean, nobody had done it before. It must have been astonishingly terrifying to be sitting on that rocket all those years ago. Gagarin was a very small man, 5'2", which meant he could fit into the tiny space capsule. He must have been a very nice man with many qualities, because his other astronaut colleagues they'd all trained together, 5 or 6 of them, they all voted for him to be the one, because they all respected him, which really said something about him. He seems to have been a genuinely nice, humble man, and when he got back to Earth, he travelled around the world a lot, meeting all kinds of people, and everyone, without exception, said he was a really, really great guy. And the tragedy was that after this amazing feat, he died in a plane crash that could have been prevented. It was apparently, flight control messed up the flight path of a small light aircraft he was in, and sadly it crashed. He was only 34 years old, and otherwise he might still be alive today. It's so ironic, having gone when no man had gone before, and the Russians, with their magnificent space program, having got him up into space and back again, should have botched a simple plane flight path a few years later. So ironic history can be sometimes. Well, today I'm going to read a poem about Travel to the Stars by William Wordsworth, who, of course, in his days in the 19th century, space travel was just a sort of entirely in the imagination and beyond anyone's idea that it would ever actually happen. But Wordsworth, looking at Hesperus, the evening star, wrote this poem, which I think is very beautiful. He sort of imagines himself traveling or walking in space one day, but only very much in a sort of fanciful way. He never, ever, I don't think, imagined man would actually do that sort of thing. Here is his poem. It is no spirit who from heaven hath flown, it is descending on his embassy, nor traveller goes from earth the heavens to espy. 'Tis Hesperus, there he stands with glittering crown, first admonition that the sun is down. O most ambitious star, an inquest wrought within me when I recognized thy light. A moment I was startled at the sight, and while I gazed, there came to me a thought, that I might step beyond my natural race, as thou seemst now to do, might one day trace some ground not mine, and strong her strength above. My soul, an apparition in the place, tread there with steps that no one shall reprove. There you are, that's Wordsworth saying to himself, while I gazed there came to me a thought, that I might step beyond my natural race, as thou seemst now to do, that I might one day trace some ground not mine. I wonder if Gagarin was aware of this poem, thought to himself, yeah, William Wordsworth, I'm doing what you wondered about doing yourself all those years before. Probably not. I don't think Gagarin was into English romantic poetry. But it's nice. Isn't poetry extraordinary, the way it sometimes prophesies things? And poetry makes the mundane memorable, and it also makes great events memorable too. And gosh, it's how we remember things. We wouldn't remember Martin Luther King, I have a dream, you know, if he hadn't said that in poetic language. That's what makes things so memorable. Thanks for listening today. Have a great day, and look at the stars this evening and wonder if what the next step is going to be. Thanks for listening.